Welcome. For today's Industry Insights interview, we have the privilege to speak with William Mendez. He works with the City of Miami as an information security officer. William is a certified information system security professional and holds a Master's of Information System degree from FIU. Thanks so much for joining me, William. I am familiar with your experience dealing with information technologies, but I thought it would be best today for us to start out with you telling us a little about how you got into working with information security.
Um, we had to go back a few years. It all started in the late 80s and basically around programming, doing systems in assembly language and possibly every other language that was around at the time. And that interest evolved into other areas of computing. Fascinated by the technology, I wanted to explore all, and so moved on from programming to system analysis and design, and later on into networking. And along the line of all this process, I had an interest in security, which has started back in the programming days with some cryptography, experimental trials, and that sort of thing. And I took that back again, that interest in security back in the networking side of it. And it all started there shaping up, and I decided security was a good career path. It was challenging, it was interesting, and it was all integrated, which was an amazing part for me.
I know that has certainly added to your depth of experience. Could you tell us about your specific role with the City of Miami and what it entails?
Currently, I am responsible for the security of all the information systems for the organization. And that encompasses from databases to network connectivity to endpoints, desktops, all servers, obviously, and all information flows. So no matter where the information is, if it needs some security around it, I have to be about that, and I have to work with it, and I have to do something about it, whatever the requirement may be.
And are you working with the development of any standards or procedures that govern information systems?
Absolutely. Since the role encompasses the whole world of security around information systems, in my particular case, it goes from seeing implementation and integration of systems to the development of the policies that govern how these systems will then be integrated and how they communicate. So there are many challenges around all these areas. One is primarily technological, where all this knowledge about how things work and how they do the under the hood, if you wish, happens. But there is a lot of upper layers on the administrative and the human part of this whole information technology engagement. So there are challenges at both ends, and integrating them is a beautiful thing when successful.
Is there a particular network structure that you have found to be most common in implementation? And why do you think this is the case?
Well, when thinking about uh, topologies that are used, I have seen too often a flavor of a star topology because of the switching networks using, say, like Cisco networks or other vendors, not to go down the route, but the way these things are architectured with core, say, devices connecting primary sites and distribution layers so we can connect users, and that kind of yields that star feeling. So you got one centralized that have spokes, and then you have another one that begins from there and have more spokes, and it makes it easy that way to distribute the information and to calculate on the aggregates, the needs for segments, for departments, for regions, depending what we're talking about. And it also comes very handy for security, or we could say is either an adapter after the fact or a feature that was there to be leveraged. The reason for that is because on this kind of topologies, when it comes to security, it facilitates the application of principles or ideas such as containment or segmentation, that we could have isolated areas or at least create some sort of virtual gate to contain information flows that are malicious or that should be restricted from others and accessing at the network layer. So star topology is primarily the one that I see or have seen the most in places, and now these days with Ethernet and all that that comes there. And I guess from the service provider's perspective, ring topologies are bound with fiber these days, and prices come down. So we'll see more of that when connecting sites that probably spread around town where there is a presence of fiber for a given vendor, given that the financials are available to it. Um, Rings are created to connect the primary sites, which will then be connected to core networks that would rely on star topologies to kind of like configure that distribution into the facilities wherever we're bringing this thing. So it mimics a huge network, which could be ring, mesh, and a mix of star.
What are some of the challenges faced when overseeing data communication infrastructure for a public or governmental organization?
Well, most of the challenges are the same that everybody faces. The difference will be in the nature of the business or the organization, what is important, and the type of information that the business use. That will be the primary difference. For the most part, the issues or the challenges or the concerns there are down to the basics, down to protocols, down to what type of communication are we running, which could be data, could be voice, and these days it's so common to find voice over data networks. So having the distinction of these networks, this segregation of the traffic, guaranteeing that each one receives, say, the bandwidth required. So understanding bandwidth requirements and how to do prioritization for the services provided, and also protecting these data flows is essential. So we would always have to know from point A to point B, what's happening in there, what kind of data flows through that, and what we need to put in place to guarantee that it is always available, is there, and is protected, and that it would always meet the requirements of the clients. Now, when it comes to the particulars of the enterprise, that is what would make the difference. And that ties back into the policies that govern and the regulations that the given organization is subject to. So as a financial organization, then there will be something related to um, financial requirements and protection. If it's a healthcare organization, related to healthcare. And there will be some common things about personal identifier information with the new Florida laws that would have to be in the play too. And there'll be probably many other ones like copyright infringements and all that if subject to it. So we have to take care of that. So monitor for these things. So when these things are put together, having this is all the good things and how it should be, which the organization, the communication, all of that stuff, then add into that mix the not so good part of it, the challenges from malicious activity. Things that could happen from the users engaging on the internet with who knows what out there because they wouldn't be able to identify it, and with targeted attacks that may be automated or delivered. That brings light into what would be so-called vectors for potential issues. So then when thinking about security, having the organization laid down as this has to go from A to B, the communications, these are the things that govern the data that flows from here to there based on the regulations. And now we have these points of attack, if you wish, where you have to then concern yourself with what do we put there as far as technology to solve those challenges. And that would include beyond routing and switches and all that, firewalls, intrusion prevention systems, and probably a few other things that would complement those systems to secure the environment.
A large part of data communication involves integrating multiple systems. Is there a particular project that you're currently working on that illustrates this?
Well, there are a couple of things that come to mind with the integration, which I should add is one of the most beautiful things that happened through all these years. Having that integration happen, time after time with different technology and trends. And right now, the obvious trend is the cloud. everything is going up to the cloud and nobody really, think much about it. It's just, we go there, it's cheaper, it's inexpensive. But there are components that have to rely on data communications to make sure that whatever we put out there in the so-called cloud can still communicate with the services and systems that are still on premise, and that the users, whether they are on an office or out on the street, can still reach either one through those connectivities. So we have integrations going on right now with cloud services and on-prem for different technologies that are in use for services that the organization provides. We also have data communications and I guess network designs in play for public safety initiatives in areas that are like, say, I don't know, imagine like downtown areas that are crowded at times. Cameras are installed there to monitor these areas, and all these cameras provide feed that have to be routed and channeled all the way back into the systems that process those videos and make sense of this data. And that's another huge integration because it involves a lot of wireless access points and wireless cameras and connecting back using encryption, VPN, all this technology to make that feed come in. Another integration that comes to mind has to do with technology, and this is not so much on the servicing front end, but internally for us. And it has to do with integrating security solutions to talk to each other. So the events and the classification of what happens in the world of security is always put in context. So imagine a light flickering here and a noise over there. All of a sudden means that you're being under attack. Otherwise, you would just see the flickering light, touch the bulb, and it's all good. Hear the noise, look around, you see nothing, and it went by. But when the two together come in, that signals, hey, you really have a problem here. So integrating systems that are natively, unique and they provide their own to bring it together into one solution. This talks to that, this one talks in, this one, all of them talk together and articulate to each other what to do. And this happens all over data communication. So we're using protocols, knowing what ports, what IP addresses, what network locations, and how to secure that communication. It's stacking up all the layers in there.
And finally, do you have any advice for students who plan on using their knowledge of information systems to have a greater impact in their organizations?
I guess the thing that I could say about that, like in many other things, the more prepared, the more knowledgeable about the subject, the better it will be. And I would share, for my particular experience, the knowledge that I acquire in the beginning, doing programs and then implementing system and designing, transitioning into networking, all of it came handy for security in looking at malicious code and understanding what the code would do, looking at the traffic generated by this malicious code as it moves around networks and being able to understand and extract the meaning of those network traces, referring back to common models like TCP/IP models or OSI models. Knowing how the layers stack up in there is critical to troubleshoot issues like that. Knowing where this content or malicious content will be has helped me tremendously to identify and validate whether solutions can do what they say they would do. And adding to that, I'll say I have seen vendors come in and do their sales pitch and say, our solution will do this, 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 and this, and it is incredible, and they will play out some demo, and it's all prepackaged, and bam, you have it there. And if we don't know these things, we'll rely on people that have the knowledge, and they will give us that information from a management perspective, so we don't have to know it all. But there is some fun aspect to it. If you know it, and you can get into it, and you can actually look at the solution and run some tests yourself, and put some time in there, it could be a fun thing to do. Not a day-to-day thing, not to constantly do it. But from time to time, I like to dive into the technology and get in there and see what it does and how it does it. And all the knowledge that I've gathered from all these areas have always been helpful to do this. And also, understanding how technology works and how the networks work and how the system work and how the business work and how the regulations come into play and building the policies to put all this picture together, it creates a whole new dimension about the whole information technology work. And it gives you a space to play with, to work with, that is beyond knowing about databases only or knowing about developing systems on a given language or just interconnecting systems or networks is much more rich and complex. The challenges are greater, but the rewards are incredible.
William, thanks so much for joining me and sharing those insights. We really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.